No forgiveness. The words didn't sound like something he would say, not publicly, not this directly, and certainly not without explanation. Yet there they were, delivered with a calm intensity that made him even more unsettling. No anger, no raised voice, just a quiet certainty that something serious had happened behind the scenes. And in that moment, it became clear that whatever this was, it wasn't just another passing rumor. For years, Jamie Dornan had built a reputation around control of his image, his privacy, and the way he navigated the industry. He wasn't known for conflict, rarely engaged in public disputes, and almost never allowed personal matters to become part of the narrative. That's exactly why this statement felt so out of place, almost like a break from the version of himself the world had come to recognize. And when someone like him chooses words that absolute, people pay attention. At first, there was confusion. No context, no names, no clear indication of what had triggered such a firm declaration. It didn't point to a specific incident, yet the tone suggested something that had been building for a long time. And as those words began circulating, they created an immediate shift, from curiosity to tension, from speculation to something that felt much closer to reality. Those who had followed his recent appearances started to notice a pattern that hadn't been obvious before. A slightly more reserved presence, a tendency to keep answers shorter, a subtle distance that seemed to replace his usual composure. None of it had raised concern at the time, but now, in light of this statement, it all began to feel connected. As if something had been unfolding quietly, just beneath the surface. Whispers started to emerge, not as direct accusations but as fragments of information that hinted at a deeper issue. Something involving trust, something that may have crossed a line that couldn't be ignored. It wasn't framed as a public scandal, at least not yet, but as a private matter that had reached a point where silence was no longer an option. And that possibility alone was enough to fuel intense speculation. What made the situation even more intriguing was the absence of detail. In a world where controversies are often accompanied by immediate explanations, this felt different. It was controlled, almost deliberate, as if the lack of information was part of the message itself. Because by saying just enough, no forgiveness, he had opened the door without revealing what was behind it. Fans quickly began searching for clues, revisiting past interviews, interactions, and even collaborations that might offer some insight. Was this connected to a professional disagreement, a personal betrayal, or something else entirely? The questions multiplied, but the answers remained just out of reach. And with each new theory, the sense that something significant had happened only grew stronger. There were also suggestions that this might involve someone within his inner circle, not necessarily a public figure, but someone close enough to make the situation deeply personal. That idea shifted the tone of the conversation, moving it away from typical celebrity drama and into something far more serious. Because when the issue is internal, when it comes from within a trusted space, the impact is often much greater. At the same time, there was a growing awareness that this wasn't a spontaneous reaction. The way he spoke, the control in his delivery, the absence of emotional volatility, it all pointed to something considered, something that had been processed before being expressed. This wasn't an outburst, it was a decision. And that's what made it so powerful. Because when someone known for restraint chooses to break their silence in such a definitive way, it suggests that whatever lies behind those words carries weight. Not just in the moment, but in everything that may follow. Now, the focus has shifted. It's no longer about whether something happened, that much feels almost certain. The question is what exactly led to this point, and why he has chosen now to bring it into the light. And as the silence continues, that question only becomes more intense. Because when someone says there will be no forgiveness, it usually means the story is far from over. The moment he added that he intended to bring the matter to light, everything shifted from speculation to anticipation. Those words carried a different kind of weight, not just emotion, but intention. It suggested that whatever had happened wasn't going to remain hidden, that this wasn't a private conflict quietly handled behind closed doors. And suddenly, the question wasn't just what had happened, but what was about to be revealed next. The reaction was immediate and intense. Fans, media outlets, and industry observers all began trying to piece together what could possibly lead to such a firm stance. Some believed it had to involve a professional betrayal, something tied to a project or collaboration where trust had been broken. Others leaned towards something more personal, arguing that the tone of his statement felt too controlled, too deliberate, to be about anything less than a deeply private matter. As discussions grew louder, small details began resurfacing. Moments where he had subtly avoided certain topics, instances where his interactions seemed slightly more guarded than usual, even unexplained gaps in his public schedule that had never been questioned before. Individually, these details didn't prove anything, but collectively, they began to form a narrative that felt increasingly difficult to dismiss. What made the situation even more complex was the absence of any direct counter-response. No one stepped forward to deny involvement, no immediate clarification emerged to calm the growing tension. And in a situation like this, silence from others can be just as powerful as a statement itself. It created a sense that there were layers to the story that hadn't yet been uncovered, and that those layers might not be simple. At the same time, there was a noticeable shift in how Jamie Dornan carried himself publicly. He remained composed, but there was a firmness that hadn't been as visible before. His words, when he chose to speak, felt more precise, more intentional, as if every sentence was part of a larger narrative that hadn't fully unfolded yet. It wasn't about reacting, it was about preparing. Some began to question whether this was leading toward a full disclosure. Would he eventually reveal names, details, a timeline that explained everything clearly? Or was this going to remain a controlled release of information, where only certain parts of the truth were allowed to surface? That uncertainty became one of the most compelling aspects of the story, because it suggested that what had already been said might only be the beginning. There were also broader conversations about what it means to publicly confront something that has been kept private for so long. In an industry where image often takes priority over truth, choosing to expose a situation, especially one that could disrupt that image, requires a level of certainty. It means being willing to accept the consequences, whatever they may be. And that alone added another layer of intensity to his statement. Fans found themselves divided, not necessarily in belief, but in expectation. Some wanted full transparency, hoping that everything would be revealed in a way that left no room for doubt. Others felt that whatever the situation was, it deserved to be handled with care, without turning it into spectacle. And between those perspectives, the conversation continued to evolve, shaped as much by emotion as by curiosity. What remained constant, however, was the sense that something irreversible had already happened. Once a statement like that is made, no forgiveness, bring it to light, there's no easy way to return to silence. It marks a point where the narrative has already begun to move forward, whether the full truth is revealed or not. And perhaps that's what makes this moment so significant. Not just the possibility of what might come next, but the fact that the boundary has already been crossed. A line has been drawn, a position has been taken, and the story is no longer contained in the same way it once was. Now, everything feels like it's leading towards something, a reveal, a clarification, or perhaps a truth that is far more complex than anyone expects. And until that moment arrives, the tension will remain, growing stronger with every unanswered question. Because when someone promises to bring the truth to light, it's rarely just a warning. It's the beginning of something that can't be undone. Because when someone promises to bring the truth to light, it's rarely just a warning. It's the beginning of something that can't be undone. Because when someone promises to bring the truth to light, it's rarely just a warning.